Picture this: a gaggle of pro-Hamas demonstrators, louder than a flock of Canada geese on a sugar rush, setting up camp and illegally occupy space at a pristine Canadian university. Chaos reigns. Classes are sent online. Jewish students are harassed, threatened, alienated. Graduation ceremonies after years of hard learning and sacrifices canceled. A lifetime milestone taken away from students who paid in the tens of thousands of dollars for the experience. Seemingly, little to nothing is being done to remove these terrorist supporters or so-called peaceful protesters. Now imagine a parallel universe. Thousands of tax-burdened Canadians, armed with Tim Hortons and a whole lot of pent-up frustration, decide to follow suit to protest and camp out on Parliament Hill. They're protesting, you see, against the rising cost of everything, especially the increasing crushing carbon tax and Justin Trudeau's tyrannical rule. One scenario would likely trigger a DEFCON 1 level response, complete with tear gas and tactical turtlenecks. The other? Well, someone might eventually get around to asking them to possibly think about moving their protest to a less important patch of grass. Why the difference? Buckle up, folks, because we're diving headfirst into the glorious hypocrisy of protest regulations in the Great White North. Canada, land of breathtaking beauty and surprisingly complex protest laws. On paper, it's all very civilized. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees freedom of peaceful assembly, which sounds lovely, doesn't it? Here's the catch: peaceful is a wonderfully subjective term. One person's peaceful drum circle is another's noise complaint waiting to happen. And when it comes to deciphering who gets the benefit of the doubt, well, that's where things get interesting. The line between passionate advocacy and inciting violence can be thinner than one would think. Our tax-revolting, peace-loving Canucks who are standing up to the government will be dealt with far more swiftly and harshly than any pro-Hamas advocate. Pro-Hamas supporters are given far to more liberty and a wider berth. Let's be honest, folks, public perception plays a starring role in this Canadian drama. Pro-Hamas protests, regardless of their actual conduct, aren't getting the condemnation a Canadian citizen would expect. Why? Because somehow supporting Hamas, an organization designated as terrorist by the Canadian government, isn't as bad as actually protesting the Canadian government in Canada. The optics are terrible, the outrage palpable. The pressure to shut it down would be loud and quick. As we saw with the freedom rallies, the Newfoundland fishermen and the Canadian farmers, we would see G7 level enforcement, batons, rubber bullets, police on horses, disappearing arrested people for days in jail. Most citizens who remember what Canada once was believe we are clearly headed down the wrong path. Right and wrong have sadly seemingly switched into a helter-skelter reality. This has been a message birthed from the mind of Steffi Gets It. If you've watched this far, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Our tax-protesting Canucks, however, enjoy a certain level of relatable frustration. They're seen as everyday folks, driven to desperate measures by the ever-increasing cost of, well, existing. It's hard to condemn someone for wanting to keep more of their hard-earned loonies, especially when you're secretly cheering them on from your couch. Here's the million-dollar question. Can you see Canada has a double standard when it comes to protests? The answer, my friends, is clearly yes. On the surface, everyone gets to enjoy the same charter-protected rights. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find a system where the application of those rights can be as inconsistent as the weather in Winnipeg. Protests not against the current government are seemingly more palatable, often granted more leeway. Those deemed unsavory or offensive, anti-government overreach, well, they're more likely to find themselves on the wrong side of a police barricade. Let's not pretend this is a uniquely Canadian phenomenon. Every democracy grapples with the complexities of balancing free speech with public safety and order. Remember the Occupy Wall Street movement? Or the G20 protests in Toronto? Those advocating for causes deemed less popular or more radical often face an uphill battle. And while Canada prides itself on its politeness, it's not immune to the same biases and power dynamics that shape discourse everywhere else. The question isn't whether these double standards exist, but rather what we're willing to do about them.